Welcome to Conversation for the Soul. Today we have Diane Pirzada, and Diane followed a unique calling, and she is following the story of her heart. Welcome, Diane. I look
Hello,
forward to
Allison.
hearing this story of your heart, but first I'd like to start with, how did your awakening begin? When did your awakening begin? Were you born this way, or how did that
Well,
unfold?
I definitely was born this way. Uh, Most of my childhood was, playing outside. I didn't have a lot of influences from anyone other than my loving parents and really nature. Nature was where I found my religion, I guess you could say. And then when I was about 19 years old, I had gone to Egypt, and when I was there, I had a real awakening. And it was very powerful. And I really did not know at that time, at 19 years old, it's very hard to know what to do with that. But I had really like a veil lifted. And at that point, I could see beyond this world.
Beautiful. So that ability that you opened up,
Mhm.
or, went a little bit deeper for you, how does that play into this story of your heart that we're going to talk about today? Because this is really, to me, a very unique story. A lot of people have their divine path that they've been given, and this one is by far the most unique that I've heard of. And it's so beautiful to me.
Well, I think where it plays in, that awakening is still very present in me today. And it happened at a time when I was traveling a lot. And so, because I'm more of a person who sees a bigger picture, the world picture, more than just looking through a small lens, I see life through a larger lens. So, when this happened for me, because I had already had the awakening, over a decade or more before this happened, I could, it was just an easy thing for me to do when this presented itself. It was, it wasn't a hard thing for me. It was so easy. Uh, and as you'll hear, it might have been harder for some, but because I had traveled a fair amount, it was easy for me
Well,
and
let's
my worldview.
share. Let's share with everybody what this it is that we're talking about, and we can see it behind you.
That's correct. That's correct. So after, the Egypt awakening, I really took more of a just an earthly path, meaning, I got married, I had children, and I was about, 15 years into the marriage, and at that point, I realized it was, probably wasn't going to go on a whole lot longer. But I didn't have a way forward. I really didn't know what to do, and I had lived in a rural area in California, not a lot of population in Monterey County area. And I really just said, God, give me a mission, give me something to do. And it was really, throwing your hands up in the air, it literally in the middle of a field saying, okay, here's a canvas, work with me. I'm willing. I really raised my hand to God. Okay, God, pick me. I'll do whatever you need done. And really, right after that, I would also say that it was a moment of surrender.
Mm.
Um, and I tell people that there's something called surrender, and then there's the real surrender, and they're very different. And I think in the real surrender, where you let it all go, there's nothing that you can do. It's all out of your hands. That is when something can intervene that that can lead you on that real path. It's not easy to do. It just isn't. It usually
Well,
comes in times of, a real crisis. It could be health, it could be many things. But the real surrender comes when you have you just have no way forward that you are aware of.
And for
need that
you, it was the
divine.
dissolving of your marriage that kind of
Yeah.
instigated all of this.
Right.
Okay, so what happened then?
So right after that big surrender moment, things began to change. There was like a new creativity came upon me, which I hadn't had previously, and it wasn't anything that I did. It just came. And there was about a year of sort of like a leading up to this moment, which I'll share, which is what's behind me here. But there was something mystical, or a presence that had come upon me, that I realized something was in the works, but I didn't quite know what it was. And that went on for about a year, but the creativity had come.
Like, describe that. What did that feel like?
It felt like I knew there was a presence there. It felt like there was a lot of freedom. There was a lot of freedom in that as well.
Mm.
And for me, I tend to, my eyes see subtleties. I see the little nuances that maybe most people don't see, even in a person's, their voice. I can usually tell right away if there's something going on, or it could be, their skin tone, just something. There's a slight shift, and I can notice that. But there was also a dialogue. There was one. I can at times get a dialogue, which is part of my guidance. And I had this one phrase that continuously came to mind, which was that there was something for me to do, and this was mine to do. And the only reason I even remember that was because I thought it was unusual, and I shared it with a friend. And I said, this seems really odd to me, but I keep hearing this phrase that there's something for me to do, but I don't know what it is. And there were some other mystical things that happened as well. I had acquired an old painting that I had found at kind of at a vintage store. And this old painting was of Mary, Mother Mary. It was really the Mater de la Rosa. And it's Mary with a sword, but the sword was under her garment. And this painting was over 100 years old. And I really felt that there was something, that came with that, because it is somewhat known that you can acquire an artifact or something that kind of comes along as an aid to help you along. So she was there from at the very beginning.
Wow.
And then there was a lot of the feminine imagery that came in, like physically. The next thing that happened after, the presence of the creative presence came, I had taken a trip right after the Mary painting, I had taken a trip to San Francisco with my family at the time, my children. And right as we got into the city, like you would see when a city is hosting a certain exhibit at a museum, we get off the freeway, we pull off the city, and bannered throughout San Francisco was the image of Leonardo da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine. And it happened to actually be on display in San Francisco. It was on loan from, I believe, Poland. And I remember thinking, I was just so mesmerized by that. And these are the things that I'm telling you that were leading up to that. And I remember when I was in San Francisco, it was springtime for that exhibit. And of course we went. But that painting in particular is very interesting because it was stolen during World War II. And so she had that painting, it was painted, I believe, in like maybe 15 something. And she had gone on her own journey, that portrait, and had been even lost and stolen through the years. And then after the war was returned back to Poland. But we went to that exhibit, and there was, again, that was, I felt like there was something calling to me, and that was part of the calling, a lot of the female and the feminine icons kept coming. And with that, again, it was like there was something coming alive in the unseen world for me. That's all I can really describe it. It was like the fabric and everything just appeared different.
And it's interesting too, all like now that I know the story, all these synchronicities leading up to it.
There were so many.
It's a clear path when you say it now.
And I was aware in some ways, but I was also very unaware.
Yeah.
So there's a balance in that when you're on your path and you're looking for the path. So that happened for about a year. And then in about a year after the creative force, the people decided in my little town to have a World War II Valentine's Day sweetheart dance. Valentine's Day in that year, which was 2004, was on a Saturday. So about a week before the dance, I drive an hour and a half to Monterey, California, and I'm really just looking around for something to wear to this themed dance. And there's a military post near our town, and we, people were going to wear their old uniforms, or retired military were going to come. And I really didn't have anything. So I just happened to be in this town, which was unusual too, because an hour and a half drive just about a week before. And so I started to look around in antique malls for something to wear. And I'm in this really just a little thrift shop. And I asked some ladies that were working there if they knew where I might find something that had a World War II theme. And they didn't know, but there was a lady in the far corner of the store who overheard the conversation, which again, I don't know how that happened because she was pretty far away. And she came over and she said, "I know exactly where you need to go." And then she told me where to go, which was this very large antique mall on Cannery Row in Monterey, California. So I go over there and I walk through the doors. A man greets me that worked there, and I told him again what I'm looking for. And he said, "Well, look in the back." And I was looking, and then I didn't find anything, and I was really going to leave. I really wasn't even going to follow I really wasn't even going to go to the antique mall where the stranger told me to go, but I ended up, for other reasons, going there. So as I'm about to leave this antique mall, these synchronicities is what you really want to know. The gentleman who had greeted me, his wife had driven up in front of the building, and he went outside to get a brown bag, lunch that she had brought him. And he's coming back in the doorway, and he's really kind of standing in the doorway, and I'm trying to leave. And he said, "Well, did you find what you were looking for?" And I said, "No, I didn't." And he pointed to a staircase, which was just off to the side, which I did not even notice as well. And then he said, "Well, take one more look and go upstairs." So I go up the stairs, and at that point, this building it's very lovely, and it has beautiful, very large windows and skylights. And when the cloud, it's over the Monterey Bay, so when the clouds come over, it brings shadowing to the inside of the building as the clouds come over. And that was happening at the time. And I could sense and I could hear, all sound that was another thing that happened during this. That was all sound was kind of drowned out, and you were tuning into something else. But again, I wasn't really aware of that. But I heard a broom, sweeping, and I look over and I see this gentleman who had just come into his little office that was there, and he was sweeping out the dust. And I asked him if he knew, and he said, "Well, I do actually have all the belongings from a woman who had served in the Red Cross during World War II." And I thought to myself, "Oh my goodness." So he proceeds to tell me about her life, and that, she lived a really fascinating life. She didn't marry, she didn't have children, but really left a legacy. And he had gone to an estate sale after she had passed away, and he had found at this estate sale at her home all the belongings from the war period of her life in the corner of the garage, which nobody was really wanting. So he bought it, and he went back and he sorted out all her things so that when I came along, it was like it had been prepared the year before.
Wow.
And I thought it was interesting, that he had, and I'll show you here. I had some of these things, like her dog tags were in from the war. Her Red Cross pins were there. I don't know if you can see them here. Yeah. But these were all the things that she wore during the war in New Guinea and the Philippines. She was in the Pacific Theater. And she really planned out her end. She wrote her own obituary, which was also there, and the photographs were there. But then what really stood out for me more than anything was what you see behind me are these portraits. These are watercolor portraits that she painted of the soldiers coming off the battlefield. Primarily, from what I have learned, was from the Battle of Leyte Gulf, which it was in October of 1944. And she had joined the Red Cross around 1942, as war was escalating. She had come from a very small dairy farm where she grew up in Minnesota. And she was never going to stay on the dairy farm. She knew that. And came to California and decided that she would join the Red Cross. Mm. And in those days, she was her name was Rosabelle Hamann. I have some pictures of her here as well. I don't know if you can see this one here, but that's her in the middle right here. This was after the war, but I love that picture of her. And then here's another one, which was in New Guinea. This is her in the center here. All eyes were on Rosabelle. And she really had that essence about her. She was a bigger than life figure. I'll put it to you that way. And so when she was, like I said, she was 30, she was in her 30s. You had to have a degree when you were in the Red Cross during the war, I believe. And she had a teaching, she was a teacher actually. So she was like a little older, so she really could, a lot of these guys were young, so she could act almost as an aunt or a big sister or, some other figure for them. And so when I saw the portraits, and I have to say at this moment, it was a catalytic or a catalyst, catalyst moment for me. And I knew instantly that this was for me. Wow. I knew instantly that I was going to get all these things, and then I was going to make something of this. I was going to follow. I was going to take what I was given, because I had the message the year before that there's something for you to do, and that I would begin to really let this story write itself. I really, there was another key moment where you really say that you're just going to be the vessel. You're not really going to control how it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You're just going to go along with it.
Be in the flow.
Right. And I have found that very difficult, because
You're Virgo.
I tend to want to take the reins.
But
I will say that for this period of time, I let it write itself.
That's beautiful.
I didn't take the reins. And in fact, for years, I let it write itself. And I've been on this journey for a very long time, and it has taken me so many beautiful places. But the first thing, and really this was the path, I'm the kind of person who, has really never met a stranger. It's just,
Yeah.
strangers are easy for me to dialogue with, to
Yeah.
enter into their lives if I have a reason. And now I had a reason. So I set out to search for these soldiers depicted in the portraits, to return the portraits. And
So the guy sweeping the floor
mhm,
sees you pick up all these photos to buy
mhm.
them. What's he saying to you? What's he thinking?
He was really, I've actually kept in touch with him through the years. And he loved every moment of it, because he is someone who truthfully, he wants things from the past, or the treasures that he finds, to end up in the right hands.
Mm.
So for him, it was fantastic. He was very happy. And
And Rosalie is her name?
Rosabelle.
Rosabelle.
Mhm.
Has Rosabelle communicated with you?
Funny enough, I've never really felt that.
Huh.
I know it seems unusual, but I haven't had that. I don't really have I've not had dreams about her. Uh, Although I will tell you, so on the search, which I'll share, but through the years, there have been many newspaper articles written about the journey that I've been on. Early on, really late in the latter part of this, I was raising a family. I mean,
Yeah.
I had so many other things to do, but this was always something that, was always pushing me forward. It was driving me always. And it is the story of my heart. But it's not the story that's on the outside of my life. It's really the interior story of my life.
Mm.
And many people don't even know about it, because it's just not, something that's on the outside. But I'm hoping to change that now at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but the question was about Rosabelle.
Rosabelle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I never did. But this newspaper reporter did a story, and he was really from a paper that I really didn't imagine someone writing that. But he came and met me in person and said, and he wrote in the article, he said, "It may be said that the spirit of Rosabelle found Diane." And I remember thinking, wow, that's so, from someone who really wasn't on much of a spiritual path. He
Yeah.
actually even wrote that in a newspaper article. So I would definitely say that, based on evidence, there's a connection,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know whether she found me or I found her. I do not have any idea how that works, but it really was the perfect mission for my life. It could
Mm.
not have been any better. And the reason was because it was just like it was custom made for me. And that's really part of why I'm here sharing with you today, is that I just want to tell people that there are infinite possibilities, that we live in a creative world. This is a creative force, and really a creative miracle for me. And there were miracles upon miracles throughout this journey, and there were healings, many healings. But the other reason that I set out on this path with all this, whether you want to call them artifacts, or you could call them talisman in some ways too. They were the things that led me. Is that I knew that when you're sharing a spiritual story, there are a lot of people who are skeptical. So I thought, if I created something that had evidence, that was very much grounded in this world, there's the physical portraits, there's the dog tags, there's the story, there are the newspaper articles, there are the videos, there are the photographs. So what I did was, I basically, for, a couple decades, I gathered together, I gathered back, and basically, like, dropped into 1944, because when this happened, it felt like I had time traveled.
Wow.
to 1944. I mean, I have to just be real. It was as if once all the portraits and all this memorabilia, if you want to call it that, because people might just want to call it memorabilia, it came with a force. It came with a power that it was as if all the memories and all the hearts and all the emotions that happened, that opened, and that became part of this for me. You know, I was so supercharged for about 4 months because I knew the magnitude of it. I just did.
Yeah.
And it has not disappointed at all. It has been above and beyond anything that I could have ever hoped or dreamed of. And clearly, no human being could have done what I did. So it's not me that did it. I just was the willing
conduit.
vessel. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I love about it is, first of all, we need to open our minds more to your purpose or your mission being something that is very like woo-woo and out there. This is something very much grounded to this earth, grounded in a time period, is very immense. And what I love about it is that it brought forth so much healing as you take the journey. Yeah. So start to share how that unfolded.
So we had the dance, and it was a story. It was funny enough. It was on the day of the heart, right? This was all set around Valentine's Day, around the heart.
You can't make this shit up.
No. And the other thing is too, during the war period, Saturday night, the sweetheart dances were, that was all you looked forward to.
Yeah.
Especially in wartime. And so that was, I often think that for some reason I was living I'm living in a remote area. There's not a lot of population, not a lot of human imprint on the earth in this place where I was living. And, it just, we set the tone, we had the music playing. It was the day of the heart. If I was to say that there was anything how this reached me, it would have been through setting up sort of what it may have been like in 1944, right? We set a stage, and there must have been an opening, and somehow it came through.
Wow.
That's all that I could really say. The other thing about the storyline too, which I think is important to say here, is that it is a timepiece. It's a dual, it's a parallel storyline in some ways that, it's the 1940s, but yet there's a present day person who's part of the story. So I love the idea that we can harness the energy of that generation, their essence. And that's really what I ended up doing for all these years. Is when I set out on the journey, I ended up really just, I did get divorced around the same time, and I had children to raise. So I decided that I would just hang out with that generation. Could I then, because I wanted to glean from them, glean their stories, glean their essence, knowing at some point that generation, the greatest generation, would not be on the earth anymore. And I always felt that when they were gone, there would be something missing.
Yeah.
So I wanted to try and harness that, and that's really what I've done. So with the search, I decide that I'm going to set out on a search to find these soldiers now, to reconnect them with the portraits. And of course, I have no idea what's going to happen. So the first thing I do is, this is about 10 days after the dance, because again, I felt like I had more of that internal dialogue, or the direction was somehow coming through. And I just basically trusted, and I had enough faith on this to say, okay, I don't know where it's going, but I'm going to at least set out on this and see where it takes me. So the first man was this gentleman up in this picture, and his name was Joe. And all the portraits had the name and hometown written on the back.
Oh, nice.
His had a little bit more writing, and he was from West Virginia. So I just called information, and his number was listed. And lo and behold, 60 years later, he was still in his hometown. And his wife answered the phone and said, I told her what had happened in California, and I was looking for the man in the portrait. And she said, well, hold on, honey, that's my husband, Joe. And he got on the phone, and he instantly remembered Rosabelle. And Joe was just barely 18. And so she really acted, like an aunt, I would say, with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not remember the portrait.
Huh.
He remembered that he remembered her, and he actually remembered where she was from. And he remembered her giving taking him out for the first time, walking him around out of the hospital. But as this developed with Joe, he did end up remembering. Yeah, I guess after it triggered.
Yeah.
But Joe really found, once this portrait, this part of his life, he gets reconnected with it. It was 60 years later that these portraits surface. And we're just at that point. It's 2004, where the World War II memorial is just now being built. And so Joe, I ended up meeting him and his wife, Jerry, later on down the line. And I kept in touch with them for many years, actually all these years. And Joe and his wife just passed this year in January of 22. Within days of each other. They were married for over 70 years.
Oh, what a beautiful story.
Yeah, he really, he's a very, very special person, and a beautiful family as well. So that was how it started with Joe.
Now, there was a healing, though, that went on.
There was, yeah. After that, when this came back, it was, I'm guessing that, it was timing, I would say. Sometimes we hold on to things for a long time and don't talk about it. And then when a stranger comes along with and it comes with a portrait from when you're in a hospital bed in a war, it was time. And so when we started talking on the phone that day, he instantly just began, it was like a floodgate open, and he began to share all the stories from his experience. And that to me was, it felt very alive to me. It just felt like I was even there. Not that I feel that I was, but I just felt that whatever he was describing to me I could see it all. I could visualize it all very easily. And I just felt such gratitude. And like I said, I had a lot of energy that was beyond human energy. This was something that had just taken over me. And I was excited and exhilarated. At the beginning of any journey, you're so excited and exhilarated. Even when you're heading on a vacation, you're just so exhilarated. But so that started out with Joe, and he really is like the centerpiece of the story, because he really set the tone for all of it. And then this next gentleman here, his name was Walter Gray, and he was from Baltimore, Maryland. And I have never found him, so I want to put that out there, that if anybody is watching this, the story is not over. It's just like it just has to be reactivated, restarted again. And I would love to find him. However, I did find many Walter Gray's a common name, and so I did find many Walter Grays. that had all served in World War II,
Mm.
including a gentleman who was a Black soldier in World War II who was in the segregated army, and his name was Walter Gray. And that was really a powerful moment for me as well, because the lady, his wife, again, it was the same story, and it was within days of finding Joe, the Walter Gray that had served in segregated army in the Pacific.
Mm.
And his wife had answered the phone and said that her husband too had served in the Pacific. And so she said New Guinea didn't sound familiar to her. So she said that she would speak to him and call me the next day, which she did. And she said that he was at Iwo Jima. But
Wow.
the magnitude of being with this in the segregated army, that really hit me. Like it was the first time that I thought about it in a completely different way. So the Walter Gray, although I've never found him, his life really brought a lot of freedom to me in many other ways. That was one way. There was other people that I did meet through Walter Gray. I ended up meeting, maybe I didn't find the portrait, but it always led me somewhere.
Yeah.
It led me somewhere that helped me. I will say that during reconnecting all these subjects, it helped me to reconnect with the lost parts of myself by reconnecting them with their portrait.
Mm. I feel like there's such a quantum thing going on here with you and this whole project too, that I don't have the scientific knowledge to explain, but it feels like you're kind of, like you said, time hopping between these two worlds quite a bit. And the other, go ahead.
Well, I was also thinking, just recently, I'm thinking how often I think most of us are thinking about others that are on the other side that have passed on. All the time, we're thinking about family members, friends. I mean, I think that truthfully, we are all somewhat on the other side more than we think, because we're thinking about them all the time. My dad passed in 2021, and I think about him all the time.
Yeah.
So in some ways, we are always in another world.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Very true. And I just love the healing that embodies this whole project on so many levels. You are getting perspectives and healing things that you're not even expecting. And these soldiers that you're finding are healing and coming to terms with their experiences and, coming full circle with that. It's so beautiful.
Another newspaper article, this lovely gal who had a lot of insight, she wrote, and what I felt happened was Rosabelle met these soldiers when she tended to their physical wounds. I came along later and helped heal the emotional. And we know, even based on, current times in our world, that I personally believe that a lot of the emotional, PTSD, a lot of the healing that needs to take place from people who were, men and women who served in Iran and Afghanistan, that it's just finding someone who you feel hears you.
Yeah.
It may not be years of therapy. It may not be, other healing modalities. It could just be that you felt heard, you felt seen. And that's what I have really found through the years. And that's how I acted with people, is to just, I see you, I hear, I'm interested in what you say. Because a healing to me could be one line. It could be one glance that someone gives you that you just, I don't know, you just feel like you're like, you're like, oh, wow, something felt whole there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I guess it's wholeness. And I really believe that one of the most important things that we can do is that if whatever it is, if we show reverence, reverence is like the cure all. Because
Yeah.
if you hold reverence for anything, whether it's people or it's what you're doing, or you hold it into a higher esteem, a higher level
Mm-hmm.
of excellence, you can't lose.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Yeah. And something I wanted you to share too that you had told me now, Joe, apparently your first soldier, was not very open with the stories, but then you kind of opened him up, and his wife had said
Yeah.
something to you about that,
Yeah,
right?
she had written me a letter some months later. Because actually what happened was after the portrait, these are just copies here. I kept the originals, in a safe place because I always felt that this story would be told to a larger audience, and that I was always hoping that it would find a place in a museum, even, just because I gathered back what had been separated out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the true hunter gatherer. I guess I still have that gene. I'm still trying to make that work. I love looking for treasures. I love looking for things, but the things that are treasures to me are not probably what would be treasures to other people.
Yeah.
So I kept the originals for hopefully in a museum one day. But what happened was, let me think, I'm losing my track of thought here.
Oh, the letter from Joe's wife.
Right. Well, right away after he got the portrait, his local newspaper did come out and, did a story and took some photos, and then they sent me the photos. So I, was able to see what was happening. This was all going on before technology is what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
It was on, I had just the dial up, there was long before social media for any of those things. So this whole storyline actually, it's in a storyline with technology and how over 15 years our technology has changed so much.
Yeah.
But so anyway, he had the newspaper come out, so he did start to open up at that point. And his wife had written me we kept in touch in letters and things, and she had said that when Joe had spoken with me, it was as if all the memories from the war were unlocked and he was healed.
Mm-hmm. That's so beautiful.
He was a really good man his whole life too, though. I mean, like this man had done a lot in his community. He had many children and grandchildren, and he was just he went on with life after the war, regardless of what he may have been feeling emotionally, or he just went on with life.
Yeah.
But so this was just something that came later, and got to meet Joe at the world. We met in Washington, D.C. for the Pentagon Channel, did a piece on us. It was some years later, but that was a really beautiful, beautiful moment. And
I'll post a link to that piece below, if that's okay with you, because it's a good informational piece.
And then there was another, so as on the journey, there were, I haven't found everybody. I don't know, it took a life of its own. So there were different ways that the story, that it happened. So this gentleman, for example, here, his name was Bill Ward, and he was from Chester, Pennsylvania. And I didn't have a lead on him. And now I'm some months into this. And I called the editor at a newspaper out there, and I said, can you help me find this gentleman, because I don't have a lead. And he said, I really love your story. Sure, absolutely. And I'm in California. I have no idea when or how they're going to run the story. And the editor ends up running that portrait in full size, 8x10 in color on the front of the morning paper.
Oh, wow.
And a gentleman working at an oil company was handed the morning paper, and that image there was the father he had not seen or heard from in 35 years. They had lost him when he was a teenager.
Wow.
And he said, the son, so it was his son, he sent me an email that day and said that he was shocked and elated to see this, and that any information that I had would help him fill in the blanks for the last 35 years.
Oh.
So again, this is not something that I was just the vessel, the willing one to go along with it. See where it led me, see where it had taken me. This other gentleman too here, his name was Tony Dawes, and he was from New Mexico. And I really don't know how he came to be found, but he was still alive. This gentleman, he had passed away, the son, but we had filled in those pieces for him. But this gentleman, he was still alive, and somehow the paper went out in New Mexico to, I just don't remember how it all came together, because there was so much on that story that they didn't, my name wasn't even in the article. So I don't even, it was an unusual thing, but they end up going out and taking a photo with him. I just don't have it handy right now, but a photo of him holding the portrait. And it truly is one of the most profound pictures. I'll send it to you. I'll try and find it and send it to you. But, and he was, I believe he was Native American. He was the Navajo code talker.
Wow.
So it's interesting that a lot of these portraits, or the storyline, depict all of us and where we all come from. And so really what my takeaway from the whole journey was that we are all profoundly and deeply and intricately interwoven with one another throughout time.
Yes. Wow.
Even the Leonardo da Vinci lady with an ermine, that has a place here for me. That essence was coming through early on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's just so much that happened. I ended up years later continuing to just, as the path ran cold with the portraits, I had to raise the 3 children. I was doing other things, and but I still had that deep passion to help veterans, and that's really what this ended up being about all along. I happened to gather 12 veterans from Monterey County, and I was able to take them to Washington, D.C. for an entire week. And most of those people, again, were strangers. And I didn't, I had to raise money for that, to do that trip, which it came miraculously together. And there's an ebb and flow. I mean, there were years of nothing. There were years where nothing happened. There were times that I did have to try and jumpstart it, or at least jumpstart my path. It wasn't always that simple. But I will say that when I did not try and get myself, involved with how it's going to go and all that, it would segue on its own. It had a way of just finding its own path, and as long as I didn't get in the way of it.
What's the most recent segue that you've had?
Well, I would say that for this part of it, there was a lot of culminating that came over the last 5 years, I would say. I ended up having an opportunity in 2017. I was asked to help accompany a Pearl Harbor survivor to 9/11. And this gentleman, he was just someone that I was connected through, through my sister, and then, it was just a series of people. And somehow I end up being asked to go along as this gentleman had been in, he was actually at the beginning on Pearl Harbor Day, he was out on the tarmac, and as the first planes came over, he was shot at and then sent to the Pacific for several years.
Wow.
He was in all the major battles of the Pacific. And so after he had gone to the 75th anniversary of Pearl Harbor, which was in 2016, he came back and he had a friend named Mike. And Mike kind of did with this gentleman what I did with all the people that I met. And so Mike had asked John, his name was John Seeley, he said, is there anything else that you want to do? And he said, well, I'm 94 at this point. I'd like to go to 9/11 as a Pearl Harbor survivor. And we were there for 1 week during Fleet Week. And John Seeley, he had a ceremony at 9/11. He acted really as a bridge between these two attacks, on U.S. soil. And he met hundreds of people, strangers, and he had a little pin that he had created that said, it was a pin that on the morning of 9/11, he felt, as if he was transported back to Pearl Harbor Day. And he didn't sleep for many days after that. And he had created this little pin that had the firefighters raising the flag at 9/11. And that to him was the flag at Iwo Jima in his mind. And he said, well, he wrote on this pin that out of the smoldering steel and ashes, America will rise again. And I do believe that. I do believe that we will find balance. America she does steady herself. There may be the up and down. And of course, as we all know, what's going on right now in our world. But I do believe that through love and reverence and, caring for other people, that even strangers, caring for strangers, that we can rise again. We are there maybe things are falling apart to be rebuilt. But I truly believe that. And I believe absolutely wholeheartedly that the arts and literature and poetry, those are the things that we can come together around. See, if we find things that we agree on and that we use that as our path forward instead of things that we don't agree on, we may rise again.
In our new Renaissance. America's
Exactly.
Renaissance.
And that's exactly what we need. And I'm behind that 100% completely. So as it stands now, I would say that, when going to 9/11 for me, and really with the Pearl Harbor survivor, really kind of brought a lot full circle for me at that point. There felt like, like it had come full circle, right? It's this all started on Pearl Harbor Day, and then going there with him just really, really brought it around. And at this point, it's about, writing and really putting the story together. And with any journey that any of us go on, really what it's about is our own transformation. This just happened to be the path that helped me in my own transformation through the years.
Now, before we wrap up, I would like to know if there's anyone out there that sees this, say they're moved by the story and they want to offer assistance, or is there something that you could use assistance on at this point in this big
Well,
undertaking?
yes. I mean, I would love to work with people of excellence in all ways. A lot of integrity I'm looking for with people. I would love to connect with filmmakers and other writers. Um, I really truly believe that this is it has to be specifically put on the heart of the people who are going to work with me on this project to bring it to the larger audience. Today I will, so yesterday, the Elvis movie came out. I don't know if you've heard about it, but what I like most about the vibe of all that was that it felt like there was such reverence for all the people involved in making that movie.
Mm.
From Elvis's, from Priscilla and from Lisa Marie and his grandchildren and the filmmaker and the gentleman who played Elvis had taken years of study, to create that character. So for me, I'm hopeful because now that we have something that you can see that there's so much love and reverence around the making of that film.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people that really want to hear what I experienced, and to know the deeper part of it, the heart of the story. What is the heart of it?
Yeah.
I think too many times people were just on the surface. I'm not a surface person. I like to be in relations and friendships in all areas of my life, people that I feel really connected to. At this point, I'm sort of at a pivotal moment on my own journey where it's, going to another level. Does that answer?
Yeah. I could see so much out of this whole story. I could see a movie, I could see a book, I could see, as you have discussed, the beautiful interactive museum piece.
Yes.
There's so much.
That was
history in
actually
this.
that vision was given to me at the very beginning of this.
Mm.
But we weren't really doing interactive museum things until recently.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like, well, maybe technology has to catch up, or I don't know how it works, but I do feel at this point that all of that is possible with the right people for the right reasons. As far as this is concerned, it's been done for love, not for money at this point. And I know that, we all have to make a living and everybody, but that has to be secondary. I mean, it's like you want to tell a story. This is a love story really for humanity. And I will say there are some, you cannot tell a World War II story without a love story there. So of course there's a love story there. I mean, what I shared with you today is not even a percent of what occurred in 20 years. It's really that much. I'm somebody who can really move pretty quickly through stuff, and I made files on everything that I did and every person that I met, and I would put it in the file. And there's some pretty big files at this point.
And you got to have a book in the works, right? About this
I
whole
do have a
unfolding.
book in the works.
Yeah.
I absolutely do. Basically the hardest part for me was not the gathering. That's the easy part, which may have been difficult for other people, but that was easy for me. But the spirit, the spiritual part of it, what is this really all about? And I wanted to share, let me see if I could find this one document. Oh, here it is. People have asked me through the years, why did she paint, why did she keep them? Why didn't she give the the portraits to the subjects, or, you know, and so I think that this might, you know, capture what may have been her reason. It's a quote that I think it's by Thomas More. He writes a lot about the soul. You should have him on your show because he's really an expert on the soul. But he says, as the poets and painters of centuries have tried to tell us, art is not about the expression of talent or the making of pretty things. It is about the preservation and containment of soul. It is about arresting life and making it available for contemplation. Art captures the eternal in every day, and it is the eternal that feeds soul. And the whole world is in a grain of sand, which I believe is Leonardo. And so that kind of captures possibly why, you know, she was really capturing the moment. And then there's another quote here: something deep in humans makes up needs and longs. Something deep in human makes up. I don't know now. It's all, you have to cut this part out, Allison. To end with the other one. But anyway, it was basically that there's a part of us that longs for eternity.
Right.
And a momentary release from the relentless pace of time.
That's beautiful.
So, and that's again Thomas More. So for me, I think that does capture it, that it's a timeless piece, right? So it's this is an eternal story, really. And that it was a stepping back from the relentless pace of time.
Well, it's a story that could take place anywhere in any time period, which is perfect.
Well, thank you.
So if people want to reach out to you,
you can, I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
You know, there's not really a whole lot on social media about this story at all. I just, I haven't put it there. I've kept a lot of it just, you know, it is the backstory, you know, in hopes that I would at some point connect with the people. So I didn't really put a lot of it on this. I haven't really put any of it on social media.
Okay. Well, I'll put your Instagram below. If people wish to reach out to you, they can get
Yeah, they can reach out on Instagram, which would be fine. And I'd love to hear from them. And, you know, the search, I hope to continue to search for the rest of the soldiers, you know, that we could find their children or their grandchildren. I mean, what a blessing it would be to receive, you know, this piece of your loved one's history. So,
well, maybe what you could do is give me the names
who's still on
and
the
where
list.
they were from.
Sure.
That you're still searching. And if people would be so kind as to share this piece around wherever you can, we'll get it out there and maybe find some of these folks.
Okay. Well, thank you so very much. I'm so grateful and I'm so blessed to have met you, Allison. I really, this is really, I'm so thankful.
This is such a beautiful story and I love it so much. And I hope everybody else feels the same way. So share it around, folks. And thank you, Diane, for your time.
Thank you.
And we will talk to you again soon, I'm sure.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.